Truly, I think that you would concur that in order to be in any leadership position, you have to be willing to serve,
Yeah.
and that is where I come from. I have a servant heart and a servant mentality, and yeah, if people want fame and glory, then become a superstar soccer or a hockey player or something. But this literally is a servant position.
Mm-hmm.
Welcome to the Carla Rand Show, a weekly podcast designed to dig into the lives of everyday people. People who are making a positive impact, people who have risen above and overcome obstacles. Insights and stories from ordinary individuals who inspire us all towards the truly extraordinary. Here's your host.
Hey, it's Carla, and I just got to talk to Martin Long. Wonderful interview with him. He's our MLA for West Yellowhead, which is the community that I live in. And so it was really good to hear his perspective. We got to talk about his life, where he grew up and that kind of thing, getting to know him. And we got to talk a little bit about what it's like to be a politician, because I always had this kind of idea of what it's like to be a politician. He was able to share, learned kind of like what are sort of his superpowers, what does he struggle with, what are some obstacles he had to overcome with his life. So let's get into the conversation. I am so happy to have Martin Long here on the Carla Rand Show. Martin, thank you so much for joining me.
I really appreciate the invitation, Carla. Thank you.
Yeah, I was really honored to have you on. Can you tell, for those of us who aren't around, from Alberta, from this area, tell us what your title is right now. What is your political title?
So my political title is I'm the MLA for West Yellowhead, so the Member of Legislative Assembly, and I'm also the Parliamentary Secretary for Tourism and Small Business.
Okay. Cool. Yes. Yeah. And I've got a small business, so that this is good. This is good. Yeah. Okay. Well, I want to just help us get to know you. So right before we hit record, I told Martin, I said, I don't really want to be talking politics. We could talk politics, but he's like, he talks politics all the time. He's probably sick of talking politics. So I just want us to get to know who he is as a person. So can you tell us about yourself, Martin? Kind of where you grew up, where you went to school, a little bit about your family growing up.
Okay. I'm actually from the East Coast. I grew up in Nova Scotia, a little tiny town called Liverpool, and I am the youngest of 5 children. I have 3 older brothers and an older sister, so I learned very quickly that I was never going to win any battles. In fact, all of my brothers learned the same thing because my sister is very competitive. And so actually, growing up on the East Coast, and then after high school, I actually moved to the West Coast, and I lived in a tiny town on Vancouver Island called Port Alberni, and I spent 10 years of my life there. I played some hockey over there, and worked in the forest industry.
What was that transition like going from the East Coast to the West Coast? Do you remember, were people different, or was it kind of the same for you?
It was actually rather shocking. I'll always remember my first time walking down the sidewalk in Port Alberni, and I was approaching this person, and I went to make eye contact to say hello, and they looked down and the other way, and I was like, "Oh, this is different." In Nova Scotia, where I grew up, you looked at people, you greeted them, you were never on time for anything, because actually getting to know people and letting them know that you cared about how they were doing was part of an everyday life, right? So it was quite a transition, actually.
Yeah. Yeah. So you were going to tell me, I think, about your hockey. Tell me about hockey.
Oh, I don't get into it too much.
Okay.
I did enjoy playing. I played for a few years on the island. It was a good time. It was actually what took me to the West Coast originally, and made a lot of friends. Made a few enemies, as you do in hockey.
Were you good at hockey, Martin, or were you kind of average, or what would you say?
I was pretty good at hockey. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I think if you're traveling for hockey, it probably means that you're probably up there fairly high, I would think.
I try not to get too much into it. I actually don't like talking about myself, Carla, to be honest.
Then you're going to have a tough time with this interview because we're going to be talking about you. But okay, well, tell me more then. So now you're on the island, you're doing some hockey. How did you do in school? Were you smart?
I was an honor student in high school, and absolutely hated school, to be honest. Couldn't wait to be done, and yeah, it was something that I never looked forward to going back to doing. I figured I wanted to have my marks at a level that I could always go back to college or whatever if I wanted to or needed to, but really wasn't interested in school. So then when I actually moved to Alberta, I worked for a few years in the oil patch, and then I think most people who know a little bit about me know that I spent 9 years actually at a company called Alberta Newsprint, which is Alberta's only pulp and paper mill. And that's where I actually got back into schooling, and I became a third-class power engineer.
Cool.
Yeah.
So you did go do some post-secondary, but how was that? Like, because it's kind of interesting. And when I said, like, are you smart? I don't mean, like, I think a lot of people that excel in school, they have certain intelligence, and people that maybe don't excel in the school environment, it doesn't mean that they're not smart. They just have intelligence in different ways. So when I say, smart, I don't mean that. But what was your experience like with that kind of, like, that sort of post-secondary? Did you prefer that to regular schooling?
Well, I preferred I did the bulk of my stuff through NATE for power engineering, and I prefer that, learn at your own pace and actually working at the same time as well. And I know that Alberta is really well set up for those kind of opportunities, apprenticeships and our technology institutes, SAIT and NATE are absolutely fantastic for that.
Yeah, a lot of people that I know go to NATE or SAIT, and I'm always like, like it's good to have, post-secondary has its place. And I mean, I'm a teacher. I got my teaching degree, and I did all that. I have 6 years post-secondary, and I think there's a time and a place for that. But I also feel like sometimes people put so much emphasis on the degree, but like, can you actually get a job? Or do you actually enjoy what you're doing? Or, like there's so many things about like post-secondary, but that's cool. So what did you do then? Like, so you got your power engineering and you started working in that field.
Yeah. And so, I worked for 9 years at Alberta Newsprint. I actually got that ticket while I was working there. And actually to the point earlier about if I'm smart, a lot of people think I was smart because I actually married a teacher.
Okay, yeah.
And it sort of confuses people when they figure out that Mrs. Long is actually married to me because she's actually a high school chemistry teacher. So
okay, cool.
You just can't figure out someone can be smart enough to teach chemistry and get hooked up with a guy like me, I guess.
Well, you've obviously done some things right. What are some obstacles that you've kind of gone through, Martin, that you'd be willing to share with us today? And I know, like, as a politician, I don't want to get into the whole politician thing, but as a politician, like, I'm guessing that, there's a lot of things that you're like, okay, if I say this, is this going to come back to bite me? Is someone like going to record this and like use this against me? Because people do that all the time now, right? So I understand that you might be a little more guarded than maybe like, the average person that I might get on this podcast, but like whatever you feel comfortable sharing, please, go ahead and share away.
Well, I'm glad that you use the term obstacles, for starters, because that's the way I've looked at life for the last probably 20 years. Is a mistake to me is something that you don't learn from and you stay doing, and obstacles, I call it learning opportunities or learning lessons, and I hope inevitably we all have learning lessons along the way. I try to only get back on some of the major learning lessons in certain moments just to sort of refocus my attention, but beyond those learning lessons, I do have other obstacles that have sort of presented themselves in this particular journey. An obstacle, like I'm actually a naturally shy person. And like I just said a few minutes ago, I don't like talking about myself. I'm not a salesperson. My heart isn't with so much politics as it is with people, and inevitably that can be an obstacle in this realm, but it's also in my opinion and in many others one of the best things about the way I approach what I do, as well is not being so focused on the politics, but on people in particular. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Cool. Okay, so why then did you want to become like a politician? Can you give us like an idea of that journey, Martin, from you like, being, this power engineering, and how did you get, like, when did you get married in there too? Did you get married before you hit politics or after you hit politics, or like, how did that work?
Yeah, so I actually got married 2009, and actually my wife, she actually came from the West Coast. She grew up over there, and I was living in Alberta at the time, and so she moved over here and she started working in Whitecourt, and then there were a number of things along the way that had sort of got my attention on the political front. Originally, the thing that got my attention was actually when I was a teenager back east, and a guy named Stockwell Day and his approach really captured my attention. And it sort of, every once in a while you hear someone say, "Oh, politicians, they're all the same," and I started pushing back on people. Like, not all of them are the same. Maybe in a lot of cases, but Stockwell Day to me stood out, and then ever since I'd sort of paid attention to politics, and then in 2012 actually, I was starting to pay a lot more attention. I felt that in Alberta specifically, like, this is supposed to be a place where you come to work, you work hard, and you are given opportunities, and your family life can move ahead. Like, there's so many activities, outdoor activities in the wintertime, and opportunities during the summer as well. And there was just a shift I felt in 2012 with the political realm here that I wasn't satisfied with. And then moving forward, I just felt like in the conservative world of politics, it was almost like they weren't giving people an option to choose conservative leadership. And I thought that 2015 actually that's what displayed that, was people rejected two conservative parties. And after that, I stopped making excuses. And it wasn't like, for me, this will be the one little bit that I throw in on politics. I didn't get involved in this because of anything to do with the NDP. Actually, I got involved because I felt that conservative people in our province should have conservative leadership that is focused on them and not on the politics of everything.
So that was kind of when you decided, okay, I'm gonna take the plunge. So what did that look like, Martin? Like, how did you get, like, did you just say, "Hey, everybody, I want to be a politician. Come on, like, pick me." Like, what does that process look like?
It's actually a pretty hard process, especially, for me. I was working full time, and I got involved. I was involved in some things in the community already. But I ended up getting involved with a political board back in 2015, and then I just went around introducing myself to people and encouraging people to become members and actually get a little bit more involved themselves. And eventually, people chose me to be the candidate for the Conservative Party, and then you sort of think, in those early days, you sort of think, eventually I won't have to work as hard. I'll just be doing the position. And it's actually the opposite. You go through a nomination and you work your tail off to win that. And then you have to work even harder to win the election. And then once you get in the position, it's it's a different world. You just keep expanding on the workload, actually. So
yeah, it just gets hard. I know, that's why I was like, oh my goodness, he's going to be on my podcast. He's going to be so busy. So I was like, oh man, like, I got to make sure. And you were actually early, you showed up early, which is amazing, because a lot of times, like, people that are busy, they show up late. So you clearly have some discipline around that, or maybe it was just a good day for you. I don't know. But anyways, I appreciate that. But I have this idea And like, I just always thought like being a politician must be so hard. Like, you know, and you're already saying like all that work and stuff. Like, would you say that it's a difficult thing? I know everybody thinks that whatever their job is the hardest job in the world, but like, I just think there's something special about a politician because they get attacked all the time. They get like, there's just a lot on them. I think there's a lot of pressure. I think there's a lot of mental health stuff that can happen when you get people like saying, I hate all your policies, or, you know, and then of course you have people that embrace them too, right? Like it's both. But like, would you say, has it been harder than you thought, or how would you say?
It's a great question, actually. Sorry for hesitating. Uh, you know, I've been asked a similar question, and just in so many different ways, like, oh, do you enjoy what you do, and that sort of thing. And I sort of hesitate before I answer because I just want to make sure it's right. I didn't really know what to think when I started trying to get into this position. All I knew is that I wanted to be here representing people, and I've told so many people, I'm not the UCP MLA for this region. I'm the West Yellowhead MLA, and regardless of political stripes, I am here to represent my constituents. And now that said, you're right. Like, some people embrace certain policies and other people detest certain policies. I get that. And so the mantra that I sort of go with is, do the right things for the right reasons. And inevitably, it is hard. Like, there's no doubt about that. But I enjoy what I do because at the end of the day, I get to represent some of the most amazing people that I have ever met across this country. Just in West Yellowhead, you see them in your community. You've been here quite a bit longer than me, actually. So
born and raised,
right?
Yeah.
So, but no, and that's what, for me, like, work is work. If it's a 18 or a 20-hour day, as a lot of them are, days, weeks away from family, it's not easy. But you know what? The people that I represent in West Yellowhead, guess what? They're doing the same thing in a lot of cases. I understand the oil field lifestyle because I worked on the rigs for a few years, and I know what it's like to be as far away as humanly possible, but in the same province, from your family for 5 weeks at a time in minus 40 weather. You have to wait for a plane to come in to get out of that situation, to get back to your family. I understand that. And so the sacrifices that I make, they're not unique. It's just a different position doing it.
Yeah, and you've had a couple of kids come all at once here. You had twins born. Can you tell me a little bit about that? Like, what was that like?
Yeah, it's sort of it's added a lot of different perspective to life. Yeah, my kids were born January 31st, and the election was April 16th. So. I often do. I try to be a good husband and a good father, but I often describe myself as the worst husband and the worst father. But no, I don't know how my wife actually does what she does, being a teacher and dealing with their 22-month-old twins. With me being away as much as I am, but I wouldn't be able to do what I do without a strong support at home, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's different. I often look forward to getting home and just having a tickle fight with a 22-month-old. You chase them around the house to catch them, and then they lay down on the floor and let you tickle them, and they just giggle. And it really does help take away from some of the things that happen during the day-to-day stuff. So.
I love that age too, because they're so like roly-poly at that age. Like, you can kind of like throw them around a little bit. Once they get older, they get, their elbows get in the way and they're just a little bit more lanky. But when they're little like that, they're just like these little roly-poly. Like, yeah, it's such a sweet age. I always think like, well, I mean, they're all cute, but like 18 months to about 3 is like such a fun age because they just want to play, and like, yeah, they're just a lot more roly-poly, and they don't like have a lot of like, they're pretty easy to deal with, like you just like, this is what daddy said, or like it's just they don't have like drama yet, So
Yeah, but that being said, both of my children have their mother's personality. Thankfully, they have her good looks as well, but they have her personality. So I'm not sure they're easy to deal with. They're a little bit stubborn at times,
oh yeah, they
but
definitely like at that age they definitely come out with like that. They don't call them the terrible twos for nothing.
yeah, but they are fun to deal with. Is the
Yes.
thing.
Yeah. Yeah. For all their like difficulties, you have a lot of fun. So it can be kind of rewarding, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what would you say to somebody who's like an aspiring politician? You know, so there might be somebody watching. Or I know I had a conversation with a gal earlier today. She's like, oh, I'm really like fascinated with politics. And I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool. So she might appreciate what you might say about that. So if somebody's thinking like, hey, maybe they want to get into politics, what should they know about that?
So it's actually an interesting question as well, because I might give different advice than someone else, and I think that I would give different advice than someone else. And if you asked 100 different people in a political position, you'd likely get 100 different answers. But don't get into this. Don't aspire to be a politician for stature would be one, or certainly not for a paycheck. For me, what I find rewarding is staying completely focused on people and and being accessible for people. I wouldn't ever discourage someone. One thing that I think has been beneficial for me is understanding what it's like to be part of a team as well. Because you really do have to work well with others in order to get things accomplished in the political realm.
So you can't just sit there, on your chair and just like order everybody around. It's not quite like that, Martin.
I've heard that some people try. No, that's certainly not my approach, and I certainly don't anticipate that to be effective. It truly, I think that you would concur that in order to be in any leadership position, you have to be willing to serve.
Yeah.
And that is where I come from. I have a servant heart and a servant mentality, and if people want fame and glory, then become a superstar soccer or a hockey player or something. But this literally is a servant position.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what would you say to somebody then who's like how do you get through it? Okay, I'm gonna reframe this question. When people are always like coming at you with negativity, and people aren't always being negative, of course, but when you do get that negativity, how do you process that? How do you deal with it so that you don't get like, oh my goodness, they hate me?
Oh, I didn't realize I was supposed to. No, inevitably, I do have people that I can sometimes share things with. It isn't always easy to just process and move past, for real. I'm a real human being, and yet, a lot of people even that approach me and they're upset, they're angry, they're frustrated. For me personally, when I talk with them, I get this response, oh, well, I've never actually had an MLA call me back, or I've never actually talked to my MLA before. And inevitably, a lot of people, they want to be heard just as much as you and I want to be heard. And for me to have some time to actually listen to their concerns, and inevitably I end up advocating for people, and there are times when we just have to accept that we're not going to see eye to eye, but again, just listening to people and hearing their concerns, and sometimes offering that advocacy, or saying, I just don't see eye to eye. That's sort of how I deal with it. I know some people get their back against the wall and can be more confrontational, and that for me just isn't gonna work. I love people, and I understand that a lot of things that are going on today, just like have gone on for the last 100 years, aren't easy to accept. And I am encouraged that people want to actually discuss those things anyway.
Yeah. And how has this year been for you? Like with all this COVID, like you can say personally, or you can talk politically, or however you want to say it. But like, has this been a tough year for you, Martin? Has this been for everybody else? Or do you feel like you've kind of maybe got through the worst of it and it's not as bad? Or, how have you kind of processed this year?
This year is difficult. All things on the table. I like to be, as much as I am naturally shy, I love people and I love to be out meeting people and being around West Yellowhead. It's a big riding and I love getting out to all the corners and seeing people at fairs and parades and fundraisers and what have you. And this past year, those events have been canceled. And so it's taken away that opportunity for me to get out and look people in the eye and hear their concerns. And so that's been difficult for me. And and hearing some of the stories, as I say, I get to represent small business now across the province, tourism operators across the province, and hearing the impacts of this on their businesses, on their livelihoods, and on their families. It's not easy, and again, I try to share encouragement when I can. I know that we're coming to a point where there's a light at the end of the tunnel right now, and a lot of people sense that. We can't get there soon enough, in my opinion. At the same time, we can't argue that that this hasn't impacted our healthcare system either. And there are just so many aspects to this that are hard to handle and hard to understand and hard to grasp. But inevitably, all that said, I do still look at Albertans, and I just shared with someone yesterday, the sense of get her done spirit that Albertans possess. It's unlike anywhere else that I've lived in this country. And I know that Alberta is going to come through this and come out stronger than ever.
Mm. Yeah, I actually did a little write up about Alberta. It's a way that I process things. So I just kind of wrote up Alberta, and I was thinking about that, and I mean, maybe not everybody, like the typical Albertan is like hardworking, get her done, we'll figure it out. Like, we're not going to stop. Like, that's kind of the typical Albertan. And so I think it's like, yeah, it's just kind of interesting that you mentioned that too. So I always am interested in people's, like how there's positive and then there's negative. And so I'm thinking, like, what is a positive thing about, like, what's sort of your superpower that makes you really good at your job? One of my superpowers is I can see gifts in other people. And so I can like just watch them for a while and I can kind of see their gifting and then I can kind of like elevate that. But what would you say is like something that you're maybe really good at that has really helped you in your job?
Nothing purposeful. But actually one word that, generally when I'm talking to people and meeting them for the first time, especially if they've been around politics for a long time, one word that keeps coming up over and over and over again is genuine. That people sense that I'm real, that I'm genuine, that I truly care and want to make a difference. And again, I'm not sure that it's a gift. This is all I've got.
Yeah, that's good though. That's good.
So.
Mm-hmm. And what do you think is a struggle? Like, we talked about obstacles. You mentioned that you were shy, like you're more naturally shy. Would you say that's kind of a struggle, or do you have other things that just make your job harder for you because you're wired a certain way?
Yeah, that is one of the struggles. I guess another one is that I don't like giving up on things. Like I do like being the best, and because of that, I don't like giving up on issues, and that means that I came into my office this morning. My staff's like, "Oh, so you were still answering emails at 12 or quarter to 12 last night?" And I said, "Yes," and they just kind of walked away from me. So that's my thing is, and I don't consider it a struggle. I love that I can keep pushing for people, and
Maybe you don't know when to
but
quit sometimes. You don't put
yeah,
boundaries up, maybe.
yeah, and often people remind me, my wife reminds me, and others, just remember, your kids are young, make time for them, and yeah,
So
just
I get that. I totally get that. Would you say you're very driven then? Like, would you describe yourself as very driven?
I would, yeah. And again, it's not driven by personal aspiration at all. And actually, I had that conversation with a colleague a few weeks ago, and said, I don't want anything in this world. Like, some people come into these positions, they want to be the minister, they want to be the boss, what have you. And my colleague just kind of smiles. He's like, "Yeah, we know, Martin. It's evident by, you're not trying to undercut people. You're not trying to um, do anything. All you're doing is working hard for your constituents." And so it was neat to have that conversation with a colleague who admitted to recognizing it. And
Yeah.
yeah.
So it sounds like you're driven, like, and I mean, I'm not a therapist, so I'm not going to try to like peel back all the layers and find out exactly what drives Martin. But like, why do you love people so much? Like, why do you care so much about people, do you think?
Uh, that I would have to attribute to the example that my parents set. Like, it was just a family value for us. And it's funny. I didn't come from splendor or or fortune by
Mm-hmm.
any means, but my parents were always willing to give to other people. And I remember when I was a teenager, a fellow showed up to visit, and I was talking to him. Away from my parents and everything, and it turned out he used to be a pastor in the town that I grew up in. And he said, "I remember your parents dropping off food one time for me and my family.
Mm-hmm.
And I know the position that your parents were in, and it was probably the last few cans of food they had in their own cupboard, but they made sure that my family could eat."
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that is, say, that's a large part of it for me, is just that example that my parents set of putting others first.
Yeah, I would say probably the same with me. Like, I just really love people. Like I'm just like, oh, like I love people, and I'm like the same as you. Like I this COVID is really hard for me, but I'm an extrovert. But I was naturally shy. Like, I don't know if I was naturally shy, but I was shy when I was younger, and then I had to kind of get out of that. But like, yeah, I just love people and I want to help people. And I definitely had that model growing up too. It was like, oh, this person needs a hand with this. We're going to go help these people move. We're going to go help this person with their fence. We're going to go, bring these people flour. It's just always like, yeah, like helping, helping, helping. So I think it's true when it's modeled. It's just sort of like, isn't that just what everybody does? Like, don't we all love everybody? But it's not always like that. So yeah, that's cool. So I want to ask you like another question. It's kind of a funny one, but like, you're dressed up, you got, the white shirt and the jacket. And I'm actually a little bit more dressed up than I normally am. Usually I'm wearing like sweatpants and like workout gear. Like, what is it like to always have to dress up? Is that kind of a pain? Are you kind of adapted to that? Do you actually like it? Like, what would you say?
Um, I don't mind it. My wife picks on me about my wardrobe now as opposed to before.
Yeah.
I did admittedly used to have a lot of Carhartt sweaters and shirts and what have you. For me, it's actually sometimes a mental thing. When I put on my suit when I'm in Edmonton, or my dress clothes when I'm working in the constituency. I sort of have a mental thing, like it's like I'm putting on a cape. Like this is my work outfit,
Superman.
well, I wouldn't go that far, but it's sort of that thing, because it's not a natural position for someone, like, say, shy,
Mm-hmm.
and actually, that's how I used to go door to door as well. Like, there would be something about my outfit that day that would be my visual, is, you know what? I have to be outside of what is comfortable for me. And so, yeah, that cape or whatever.
That's so cool. Because I actually totally get that, but I didn't get that for quite a while, Martin. Like, I would just like, and in fact, I kind of prided myself on being, the fitness instructor that like, will wear her pajama pants, or like, the fitness instructor that's just wearing these ratty old sweatpants that she's had for like 15 years, and they got holes in them or whatever. Like, and so I kind of thought, and that was a way that I was relevant. But then I was starting to like, I'm getting filmed quite a bit. So I'm on camera a lot. And I'm like, Carla, you maybe should just step up your professional game. And then what I did, like I started getting maybe some nicer clothes. I was like, oh, like it does something to your mind too. Like you put yourself in that position. And so like an entrepreneurial friend of mine was talking about that too. He bought like some, the Rock, The Rock, some of his clothes, his clothing line or whatever. And he's like, yeah, when I wear this, I feel like The Rock, and that's my aspiration. He's trying to get built or whatever. So I was like, yeah, there's a lot of truth to that. I think just like, what you wear, how you act, the things that you say, like how that can kind of affect you and how that can kind of help you, like you said, put that cape on, put you into like putting on your like politician hat versus maybe when you're at home, in your jammies playing with your kids or whatever, right? So that's, yeah.
And I get, and all things told, if you show up in my house for a visit, there's a better chance of me being in sweatpants than a suit.
Right.
So.
Yeah, and I remember, like you were talking about going door to door, and that's how I remember you. So we live out at Piers. We live at the end of this no exit road, and there's this guy that shows up, like knocking on our door, and I'm like, who is this guy? And then you come in, you're like chatting with the kids, and you're like talking to us all. Of course, this was before COVID, and I was just like, who is this guy? And you're just like, yeah, standing kind of in our kitchen, just kind of like leaning against the counter. You're chatting with us, and I'm like, what, what's going on? And it just totally was different because, like the typical politician, like he might knock on the door, like hand you a flyer and say, vote for me, I'm amazing, and then like walk away, right? But you like were coming in, you're like chatting, and I was just like, holy, so you clearly have like, that is a clear gift for you. Like you talk about that genuineness, that connection with people, that way to like bring yourself, I don't want to say down to people's level because then it makes it sound like you're better, but just like meeting people where they're at. Like we were just like dressed casual, we're comfortable, we're in our kitchen, the kids are probably making a mess. So you were able to just like bring yourself to that place. And I think that's a real gift that people can have, is like becoming what those people are. And they even talk about this, like when you're speaking and stuff, you want to try to match, you probably have done this kind of training too, but you kind of want to match like the energy level of the person that you're speaking with. And that's always a challenge for me because my energy level is like the Energizer bunny. Like I'm usually always up here. So I'm like, okay, Carla, like just chill it. Like this person, they're relaxed, like just calm down, So I think that like, that's a gift too, to be able to match that. Did you know that about yourself, that was a gift? Like, do you go out of your way to do that, or does that just come naturally to you? Or both?
Yeah, I hope it's natural because I don't have any formal training in it. Mm-hmm. And actually, to be fair, you guys were making lunch that day.
That's right.
It was a Sunday afternoon after I know that you guys had just gotten home from church, and
right.
and you guys were making lunch, and yet you still welcomed me in your home, and you were your husband. He carried most of the conversation while he was dishing out food for the kids.
That's
and everything.
Right. I remember that. That's right.
Yeah. So and that's sort of one of those things that I do, like. The interactions I have with people are real for me because people are real for me. Mm-hmm. I know that it's weird to remember some of the details, but again, it's my focus. And a fellow had called my office a few months ago, and he had some concerns, and I said, I was at your table, and he's like, yeah, you remember me? Yeah, you and your wife let me in. You have a little carport and that sort of thing. And I try to be like that with everyone and just say I'm not above anyone, but like, so to say to come to their level. No, I agree with the sentiment. Meet them where they're at. Mm-hmm. One of the things that I did prior to this as well in my community involvement was I was chair of the board for a soup kitchen in Whitecourt, and just loved any opportunity. Working shift work and doing this doesn't present a lot of spare time, but any opportunity I had to sit and just have lunch with people coming in. just love those opportunities.
Yeah, me too. I love being around people so much. It's just like my favorite thing. So what would you say, like, what is something that you really enjoy? We're going to wrap this up right away, but what do you just really love? Like, obviously we talked about the people thing, but like, what would you love to do maybe in your spare time, if you ever have spare time? Like, what do you really love, Martin?
At this point, for spare time, like, I have hobbies still. Like, I don't get to play a lot of hockey anymore. I'll confess, I got out on a golf course a couple times this summer, like literally a couple times. One of the days happened to be my anniversary, actually. That was my anniversary present. My wife sent me golfing with a few of the guys. Again, most most understanding wife in the world, I think. But these days, I do love getting home. And last night when I get home, just before kids' bedtime, and my daughter spinning around making herself dizzy, and then my son started doing it, and those are the moments that I love right now. Is just getting home and having a few quality minutes with the kids, and reading them a story before bed, and that sort of thing.
Nice. Nice. So is there anything that you want to tell people that are listening right now, that kind of like your last sort of kick at the cat here? Any last words, Martin, for anybody?
I understand that we've had a lot of struggles this past year, and I never would claim to be perfect. I never claim to get things right all the time, but I do hope that people know that for me in particular, reach out. Like, if you need to email or call or whatever, myself, my office staff, we're available and accessible. And and we're almost through this 2020 year at this point, and hopefully as we move forward into the next year, we see a lot of positive changes, and it's.
Thank you.
That's what I'm looking forward to anyway.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Martin. So where would people go, like, if they want to connect with you? Where's the best place for them to go?
My office in Edson is the easiest way to sort of get in touch with me. We have an email. It's west.yellowhead@assembly.ab.ca.
Okay.
And I wish I knew the phone number off the top of my head, but we're easy to find via Google, though. And that's honestly the best place to figure out how to connect with me. My office staff, they've taken on their roles similar to how I've approached this, and just how do we help people with what they're facing right now. And as I say, I don't get out a lot these days to big events because we don't have big events these days, but as soon as we start getting into those, people will see me more out there, and never hesitate to approach. I'm always willing to and actually, I shouldn't say I'm always willing. I always look forward to people approaching and talking and sharing what they're going through. And occasionally someone calls or emails or approaches me and says, hey, you know what? Don't agree with everything, but appreciate that you're out there working for us. And that's always fun too.
Yeah, and that has one thing I've been noticed about you too, is like, your work ethic that I've seen. I'm like, holy, like this guy, like, you got your signs out right away when you do the election, and you're like out at people's houses, and like you're just going and going and going, and I'm like, whoa, like this guy's like, he's like the Energizer Bunny, like, oh my goodness, right? Like, you must get exhausted sometimes, but clearly you have that work ethic, and I'm sure you've got an awesome team around you too. So that's awesome to see. So thank you, thank you for representing the people, Martin, and thank you so much for being on here. It was so good just having this chat with you. I really, really appreciated it.
Carla, it has been absolutely a pleasure. Thank you for. Please say hi to your family for me. Anytime that I pass by the highway, see your dad's shop, and anytime I get to see you or your husband, it's always a pleasure. You guys just have a way of making people feel better about themselves, and I certainly appreciate that. So
thank you.
I wish you all the best.
Thank you. You too. This episode is brought to you by my company, Power Fitness Online. We are a tight-knit fitness community, and we guide you every step of the way to get fit and stay fit. through our live workouts, nutrition coaching, and incredible support team. Go to powerfitnessedson.com to learn more. Thank you for tuning into the podcast today. If you enjoyed it, please leave a positive review on Spotify, Stitcher, Apple Music, or wherever you're listening. And if you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, I would love to see your comments. I would love to know what you think about this episode and interact with you. I love hearing from you. Once again, I'm Carla Rand, and this is The Carla Rand Show, and I can't wait to see you next week for our next episode.